I think we would have been a little bit more adventurous in China as much as that was an adventure in it.
Welcome everybody to this episode of Dad Enormous. It's Jonscott Turco. I'm here with Andrew Martschenko, my good friend for a very long time. It's good to see you. I know Patti and you and the boys have been quarantined, as most of us have been. Andy, we know each other since college. I'll say that. That's easier, right? And so tell us a little bit about who you are and who you are as a dad.
So much like yourself, John Scott, original New Yorker, been fortunate enough to see a lot of the world. So I started out as a finance major in Manhattan and then turned into a marketing and brand professional a couple decades later. So I've had the opportunity to live in other countries. I've had the opportunity to experience other cultures. But I think the biggest defining moment that I had was really my two kids, Will and Patrick. So Will is 7 years old and Patrick is about to be 6.
Amazing. I hear we might see them flying by at some point in the
video. Probably, most likely.
Awesome.
Always makes the conference calls or video conferences that much more interesting.
I bet. So I'll ask you to think back to, let's say, almost 8 years ago when you first found out you were going to be a dad. Take us back to that point. What was your reaction and where were you in life in that point and how did you feel?
So for me, it was more of a process in the sense of it's almost like a formality. It's something that you need to do in life and you always get coached. And as you get older, I had family members that would say, look, you really should have kids at some point. That's just something in life you don't want to miss out on. So, that mindset, it became more of one of the things I had to do. But I think once you actually do have a kid, there's just so much that you learn and you realize you don't know. It turns into more of a life-changing and life-defining moment. So, at that moment when I found out I was going to be a dad, I was like, hey, that's great, excited about it. But it was really like once Will was born, the suddenness of so many different things hits you. But just actually realizing this little thing is so attached to you and it likes you and it depends on you, which is also another kind of scary kind of thought process that goes in there, that someone's actually depending on me. That's really when the momentum started to build. And like I said before, like I can't envision a world where my kids don't exist.
Yeah. Again, we go way back, you and I know we've talked many times about this, and you had so much experience in life around the world, work experiences, travel experiences, rich cultural experiences before you became a dad. So how do you think like the global, like the world view of every place you've been to, you lived overseas for a long time, how has that influenced how you show up as a dad today with Will and Patrick?
Well, being a parent obviously requires a lot of patience. So that's one. And when you travel and you live in other countries, you're constantly working around to figure out and adapt. So I think it makes you a little bit more of an agile or more flexible parent. I've been lucky enough to actually take my kids of all places to China and live there for a few months. So they have that experience. And for me, that's really important because I just want to make sure that they know that there's a bigger life outside of suburbia. But I do think that time outside of the U.S., I do think even just growing up in the Bronx, the time that I spent there, the basic important family values of family being there. I think the travel just made me a little bit more patient and realizing, okay, perfection's not needed at that exact moment. We can kind of work through it. So it's really much more of trying to enjoy the moment, spending time with them, and just even as we're talking now, it's like, my older son is 7 years, and where did the 7 years go? Your kids are in college, so it's even
they're out, buddy.
They're out. See what I mean? Well, maybe it's a few decades of working, you lose kind of sense of time, but it is really just enjoying the moment. It really is just watching something so innocent to just learn things for the first time. I remember both kids going, oh my God, I don't know how they're going to learn how to drink out of a straw. It's just not humanly possible. And they figure it out, and there's probably 1,000 other scenarios like that you just have no idea how they're going to pull it off. Actually, with the quarantine, they learned how to ride on 2 wheels, and I was really afraid of Will, just falling down once or twice and calling it a day and saying, but he did, he stuck it out. And then the both of them within one day were riding like maniacs. And, you know, now it's like, hey, look at this, no legs, you know, and things like that. So it is the patience, it is just the ability to enjoy progress and just watching them learn.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, when you look back on your childhood and you look back on a negative experience you don't want to repeat as a dad that you experienced growing up in your life, is there something that jumps up at you in terms of like your childhood that you're committed to not repeating going forward?
Yeah, I think it's less about the decisions I made than more about dealing with the cars that you have in front of you. And, you know, throughout my life, my grandparents raised me, right? So like, you know, for all intents and purposes, when I go to PS 106 and it's like, draw a picture of your mom and your dad, it was my grandparents, you know, and, you know, my mother was around, but for the most part, my grandparents were there. And that was just one thing that I always wanted to make sure that kind of as a dad, that I'm always present there, that they've got somebody they can connect with, they've got somebody they can lean into, you know, and just the basics of seeing aspects of you that are naturally there and getting embedded into them. So that sense of family, that sense of respect. I think respect is another big word, which is kind of interesting in these days and times. You know, and my wife Patti in particular, you know, one of the things that we both as parents emphasize is, at least pre-COVID, you know, walk up, look somebody in the eyes, shake their hands, introduce yourself, but also be respectful. You know, be respectful of your elders, be respectful of other people. You know, we try to condition them. Hey, if there's a kid that's quiet sitting in a corner, go in there and talk to them. So it's those aspects where, as a kid, I had to figure a lot of things out for myself, which helped me out in some ways, maybe created complexities in others. I think with my kids, they have everything for the most part, and I just want to make sure that they also get to experience a little bit of life around the edges. You know, not everything's always so perfect. Not everything's always a smooth transition. So there are things that I don't want them to repeat, but then there are things that you just want to make sure that you're not a helicopter parent, you're not controlling their life, and that they can kind of grow, mature, experience things, not be in a comfort zone necessarily of this kind of nice suburbia where everything is quiet, and just have that stability and respect to people around them.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And you bring up something really interesting, which is trying to find that balance between giving your kids all you want them to have and also giving them the freedom to make mistakes and to learn from just experiencing all that life has to throw at them and how they handle it. You brought up a great example. It seems simple, but that the bicycle example with Will is a great example. It's a metaphor for so many things, right? So as they go forward in their life and you kind of find that balance on a moment by moment basis between being involved and letting them figure it out, those opportunities are gonna obviously continue to present themselves to you. And as you step back and look, if you were to think ahead 10 years, you know, Will's graduating from high school, you know, Patrick's trying to get some time behind the wheel to get his permit. You know, like if you imagine yourself 10 years from now in 2030, what do you imagine telling your kids if they come and take a clip of this video in 10 years and see you and talk to you a little bit about, you know, what was happening then? And you say, remember COVID, remember the quarantine, and this is what you guys were doing back then. How would you categorize this as a dad in terms of how you feel about being their dad now?
Well, you know, it's funny. You always talk to a lot of people with kids, and you always got to be careful there. But there comes a point where your kids get their own lives, and they get their own friends, and you're not their most important focus anymore. So I dread that day, right? I mean, I'll be honest about it. I dread that day where I'm just kind of like, yeah, Dad, whatever. Then I dread as they get older, kind of thinking about what we did when we were, or at least I know what I did when I was in high school or college, and probably the subsequent 8 to 10 years after college, scares me, right? There's that saying of having 9 lives, and some of us have like 15 or 16, kind of going through that.
I met you when I was 18 years old, so I have a couple of these shared memories with you.
Those were those were interesting times. So I think that's the part where, again, just knowing that you're trying to teach your kids the right values and just teach from right or wrong, it's just going to come a point where you can't control it. And you just hope that you did the very best work possible that you could while they were young to help them assess things, to help them prioritize, to help them make good decisions. And, and more importantly, when you make a mistake, to bounce back.
Yeah, resilience. It's critical.
Resilience. But I do fear with that, especially with some friends who have kids in that age group where it feels like payback time is coming.
As you said, you dread that time, and I can remember vividly. I vividly remember that moment. It was a blink. I think it was like 7th grade, and I was racing home from work early one day. I called my son, and he was out of school. And he just got his phone like really up and running, and I said, "I'm driving down to you, buddy. I'm on my way." And he goes, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "What's up?" He goes, "Well, we're gonna go play basketball at Eric's house, but I'll go home." And I'm like, No. Go play basketball with your friends." And I remember like I pulled into Starbucks, and I was like, "What the heck do I do now?" Like it was that moment where it just was a snap, and it was awesome, and it was also, as you said, I still remember it. It's been a couple of years since then for me. So as you look at this in terms of your feelings, if you were going to tell the boys in 10 years how you felt about them as their father at 7 and 5.
I don't think the message really changes, does it? I get up every day. I just remind them, I'm like, hey, the best thing is, we're the two most important people in this world. It's you guys. I don't think the message really changes much. I think, we'll have pictures, we'll have memories and experiences as they come up the stairs to kind of reference to. Oh boy, Will. Edit that.
10 years. I gotta show
yeah. You're on video. You got to be careful when that goes on. All right, buddy? Yeah, so I don't think the message necessarily changes. I think it'll be interesting just because it's this period of time where, I don't have a reference point where the whole world shuts down for this amount of time. I lived through 9/11. I was coming, I lived in Boston at the time, working in New York.
So if you were to think now in the last 7 and 5 years of if you had a mulligan to take, something you did as a dad, some reality you experienced as a dad, what would you, if you could, go back and like tweak or do over if something pops into your mind?
I think we would have been a little bit more adventurous in China, as much as that was an adventure in and of itself, to go with a 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old in China and spend a couple months there and experience the health system too as well. In a sense, Patrick, he had some soft tissue damage, but we didn't know if he broke his leg. I think we would have probably traveled even more and exposed them. They've been to China, they've been to Hong Kong, they've been to Argentina. We've gone to a number of events across the U.S., out to California, out to Michigan. So the travel's there, but I think actually spending a little bit more time across Asia, just even if it's in picture form, that again, it goes back to this whole point of not growing up in a bubble, of just knowing there's a whole bigger world out there. That would be the one thing that I would probably correct. I think at one point we were going to go to Tokyo Disney and just decided like, okay, that's just going to be painful. Let's just hang low at home, or, even going to Singapore and things like that, even though it was like a 5.5-hour flight from Shanghai. That would be one thing. But I think just generally speaking, my wife worked on the weekends, and I just took every opportunity I had to take him to basketball games, to take him to football games, to take him to aquariums and spend a lot of time. So I don't know. I think I've been lucky where there's nothing where I've said, oh my God, I need to take a mulligan.
Okay.
But I do think the time that I spent in Asia, I would have loved to have probably gone a little bit deeper there.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah.
When you think to the future, when you think about the boys in 20 years and you in 20 years, can you like project that far into the future and just imagine like what you hope for them as people, as men at that point, like what you imagine for your 27 and 25-year-old sons?
I just hope they have the core skills that they know how to survive. I think it is survival at the end of the day. I mean, I can go back to in my career when we were a couple of years out of college, everybody was talking about re-engineering, right? So essentially everybody started outsourcing things, and I always kind of told myself, oh, it's they could take your job away from you, but the knowledge you have, no one's going to be able to take that away. And I think there's still a lot of truth to that. But you have to be experienced and comfortable enough with yourself and have good skills and maybe just be a little brave to try some things differently. That's what I want to make sure that they have, because who knows what the world's going to look like in 20 or 30 years time. I just want them to be decent people. I just want them to be respectful, but I also want them to be able to say, all right, I'm in a situation now with some challenges in here, and I actually can figure out how to work my way out through these challenges. I think if I could say that they are comfortable in their own shoes to think like that and do that, I'll be like, okay, good people, and they can kind of work through problems and they hold themselves accountable. I've done my job.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you bring up so we go to this perspective, we like zoom out to 20 years. And I'll ask you a question about legacy. So if you can imagine your boys talking to their sons about you as their dad, what do you want them to kind of remember as key points about, grandpa?
I hope I'm around for a grandpa status time. It's funny. I put together last Christmas. So one of the things in my kind of sports enthusiastic world, my boys have been to the last 3 seasons, every home game at West Point for football. So I put together an album of the home games, their first game, a lot of the travel games, go to the Army Navy game every year, and really a lot of that again was probably more so about instilling values. It's just a very special place when you go up to West Point, and I think there's going to be a part of that of like, oh, remember we went to the football games and oh my God, I hated it. But oh, they've never expressed that they hated it, because I don't think they know anything different. But just like, wow, we spent a lot of time there, but it was thoughtful. There was a reason of why we went there. We enjoyed that time together while we were there. We enjoyed the lollipops that had to be produced in the third quarter. That's going to be a big part of what we do. And I think just in general, the sports, the commitment that both my wife and I have to the kids, of just really making sure that anything that they have out there that can make them grow personally, culturally, educationally, that we've taken advantage of that. I want them to be able to kind of say, hey, yeah, we did a lot of stuff we didn't really care for, but there were the handful of things that I am so grateful that they were there, that they kind of opened up and exposed us to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, yeah, you guys have been to tons of games. I've been following along obviously before the boys came along, you're a big fan.
Yeah. How many 7-year-olds can say that they've been to 50 football games and probably like another 35 basketball games and another probably 25 baseball games?
And again, you're instilling in them this quality time and this time together as a family, which I think is awesome. So I'll ask you one question, because I'm trying to think about how these videos can be useful for people who are looking at these, who like maybe in all different walks of life, starting their families, having families. And you and Patti started your family in your 40s. So
40s, yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about that, how do you think that that's been an advantage for you? And how do you think your fatherhood, or your being a dad, is better because you waited longer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a right answer here. Where we were good at 45 was we got a lot done together. Like, we were able to travel the world. We were able to have, I mean, like I said before, the share of summer houses and ski houses, and just losing your mind for a decade and a half or whatever, and just living life to the fullest. You did it. I sit back here now and I'll have like a White Claw or two, and it's like, I'm done. Like I really don't need to. And if I do that once a week, I'm in a good spot, right? We were happy that we were able to do a lot of those things and just get it off the plate. You never felt like yeah, you could look back and kind of say, maybe I would do a couple of different things differently, or I would travel somewhere else differently. But we lived life. And once we had the kids, at 45, one is, I would say, is don't give up. Like, it's amazing. Like, you can, you can do it. You at 45, traditionally everybody says, oh my God, don't wait beyond 35. You can. I would encourage people not to, because it just gets a little bit more complicated, but you can. And life at that age, it's a little bit rough. You're a little rusty, and not sleeping for about 2 years or 3 years can definitely be a challenge. But it's not bad. And I shouldn't say 2-3 years. Maybe it's like the first 10, 11 and a half months are pretty rough. But you can do it. Enjoy it while you can do it, while you are doing it. Have no regrets. But when you're ready to have a kid, just make sure that you've done the things that you wanted to do. Because then the kids do become the focal point of your life. I mean, they are the anchor point. Yes, you're still going to have interests. Yes, you're still going to have career aspirations. You're still going to have to work really hard. But the kids really should be the priority. And if other things are changing, and I'm sure you've seen this in your world, and I've seen in mine, it's hard when you work with people that don't put the kids in their focal point. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that in the business world. I just remember this New Year's of we were all telling stories about our kids and why we were committed. And as much as my kids were in China, there was a point where the running joke was I would spend 4 to 6 weeks out there and just, go home, drop the dry cleaning off and come back. And I was doing that. So I had this commute going between New York and Shanghai. And of course, my kids were hating it because, it's all FaceTime and there's only a point in the morning or a point in the evening you could talk. And they were still fairly young. So they had pretty strict times that they were getting up and going to sleep. But I do remember around Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving, having a conversation with Will. And of course, he was angry. He didn't want to talk to me on FaceTime. And I asked him a question. I said, hey, Will, are you upset with Daddy? Yep. And I said, Will, do you miss Daddy? And he just erupted in tears. And at that point, I pulled my card out and I said, that's it, I'm out. Like, this just can't continue kind of going forward. And I think you just need to know that as a parent. They take preference. They shouldn't be secondary. You should be putting them into your considerations. Have your career aspirations, have the things that you want to do in life, enjoy your friends, but always remember that your kids are really important. And that's why it's important to just live life. And then when you're ready to settle down and have kids, you're in a better place. And if you have kids and you had it early, that's not a bad thing either, right? You have them and there's just a different set of lessons that you have. And then there may be things that you do on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's no right or wrong in this. I think it's a matter of, you said a few things, which I think are presence. That's the theme of like living life fully and living life intentionally at all different phases, like being present. And you were certainly present in living your life before kids. You and Patti certainly exercised a great degree of presence in the travels and experiences you had while you were together before you had kids. And then, the combination of presence and priority, which is what, we live as dads, I think is a critical combination and component to really essentially what being a dad is all about. It's the presence and the prioritization in the continuum of how we live our lives every day. So yeah, that was a great summary. I appreciate it. Any final thoughts for people watching?
Yeah, I would just say enjoy it while it lasts. And sometimes it's hard to, kids they're going to be like anything. They're going to make you smile and they're going to make you cry and everything in between. So it goes by quickly. It's hard to believe that Will is 7, Patrick's going to be 6. Now I just can't even lift them. I used to carry Patrick on my head all the time. And I'm like, sorry, dude, you're going to have to actually, walk from the parking lot to the stadium. Or, if we were in the city, it was the same thing after 3 blocks. It's like, Daddy, I'm tired. It's like, nah, sorry, buddy, you're going to have to walk. So just enjoy it. Cherish those moments that are there. Document it. There's wonderful digital cameras and, instead of buying an album and, with those sticky backgrounds or keeping them in a shoebox, spend some time on the computer, put those things together, catalog them, but enjoy every moment that you have.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Thank you so much.
You got it, Jonscott, anytime.
Thank you very much. And for those of you that are new, please subscribe or leave a comment down below and let me know if you have any questions or if you want to be part of the next episode. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.